I've replayed that morning in my head so many times that it feels like a bruise I keep pressing just to see if it still hurts. It was the quarterly review, the same meeting I'd sat through for 7 years, but that day something in me shifted before I even knew it had a reason to. Maybe it was how the conference room felt too bright, or maybe it was how my badge felt heavier on my shirt than usual, like it already knew it wasn't going to be mine much longer. I remember sitting there, hands locked together under the table, thinking, if today goes like every other quarter, I can survive another 3 months. I didn't know yet that surviving was no longer the assignment. I'm not the kind of guy anyone notices. I'm the quiet one in the back of the room with a laptop, the one people call only when something breaks. I don't sell. I don't pitch value. I don't show shiny slides. I build things that keep the lights on, and for 7 years, I kept an entire company breathing. Servers, pipelines, deployments, monitoring. Every invisible thing executives assume just works because they've never seen how close it is to falling apart. That was me. That was my role. The guy who fixed everything at 3 a.m. and got a Hatim in Slack for it. No raise, no promotion, no recognition, just silence. I learned to live with that silence. I learned to stop expecting fairness. I learned to swallow things that should have made me walk away, like the year the sales team got bonuses for landing a contract I built the infrastructure for, or when the CTO joked that I was practically a piece of furniture, reliable, uncomplaining, always in the same corner. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because it's easier than admitting you're hurt. But that morning, something inside me was off. A tension I couldn't name. I watched people file into the conference room with their coffees and their fake enthusiasm. Tanya from HR rehearsing her smile. Ben from marketing bragging about clicks. The sales guys slapping each other like they just won a championship. And my boss, my CEO, walking around with that confident, bloated swagger he always had before he made an announcement. I remember checking the time on my phone. 9:57. 3 minutes until the meeting started. My inbox had 3 new alerts. The overnight backup job had stalled again. I could fix it in 10 minutes, maybe less, but I closed the notifications and stared at the table instead. It wasn't urgent. Not anymore. Nothing felt urgent that day. The CEO walked in at exactly 10:01, like someone who believed schedules existed purely to prove he was above them. He clapped his hands together like a game show host, grinning so wide it looked painful. "All right, everyone," he said. "Big news today. Let's make this one for the books." People chuckled. I didn't. My stomach tightened. Looking back, I think part of me already understood. Not the details, not yet, but the direction. You don't work somewhere for 7 years without learning to read the weather. And that room felt like the air before a storm. Too still, too warm, too expectant. He started with the usual performance metrics, charts that meant nothing, percentages pulled from thin air, words like trajectory and projection. I wasn't listening. I was watching him, watching how he kept glancing at the directors, watching how they kept avoiding everyone else's eyes, watching the way he held the remote like it was a trophy. Then at one point, he paused. He didn't have to. Silence followed him like a personal assistant. He smiled again, a slower smile this time, a rehearsed one. "I'm proud to announce," he said, "that we've finalized the sale." For a second, no one reacted. Then the room erupted. Cheers, claps, excited whispers, the whole circus. Someone behind me even said, "Let's go!" like they'd just won concert tickets. I sat there with my hands still folded, my face calm, my pulse sharp. I didn't cheer. I couldn't. Something in the pit of my stomach unclenched, but not in relief. More like resignation. More like confirmation of something I'd sensed long before the words were spoken. He raised his hand for quiet, pretending he needed it. The room fell still, and as part of the acquisition, he dragged out the pause. He loved pauses. Leadership will receive transition compensation. The applause got louder. And the rest of you, another pause. I felt the room lean forward. Will be receiving nothing. I swear I didn't breathe for 5 full seconds. There was confusion at first, a ripple of disbelief. Then, unbelievably, people laughed. Some clapped again, like this was some sort of edgy joke. A few exchanged looks that said, "Well, what can you do?" And the CEO? He stood there like a man expecting applause for announcing the weather. I didn't cheer. I didn't move. I just watched the room erupt around me like I wasn't even in it. And the strange thing is, I wasn't angry. Not then, not yet. Just very, very awake. Because in that moment, with everyone cheering for nothing, I finally understood where I stood in that building. And I understood something else too. Something quiet. Something steady. This wasn't the end. This was They say you can tell a lot about people by how they react to bad news. That day I learned you can tell even more by how they react when the bad news isn't obviously theirs. It's easy to laugh when you think the pain stops an inch from your own skin. Someone in the back yelled, "We did it!" like we'd all been pulling the same rope. A few people actually stood up to clap. The head of sales pumped his fist. Tanya from HR had tears in her eyes. The proud kind, not the ruined kind. Phones were already out under the table. Thumbs flying, notifications lighting up faces. Leadership compensation echoed in my head, like an error message stuck in a loop. I looked around. Not one person turned to the tech side of the room. Not one manager looked at the people who had kept the product from collapsing all year. No one asked, "What about the folks who kept the thing we're selling alive?" Nothing. Just smiles, handshakes, and backs being patted by other backs, used to being patted. The CEO kept talking, some boilerplate about opportunities with the new parent company and incredible synergy ahead. But he'd already delivered the real statement. You're getting nothing. Everything after that was just noise. I felt my jaw clench. Not hard, just enough to remind me I still had bones. Of course, he went on, the acquiring company understands the value of our people. There will be interviews, evaluations, opportunities. He said opportunities like a man tossing scraps off a balcony. I raised my hand. I don't do that. I'm the guy who sends an email, opens a ticket, quietly fixes it. But my arm was up before I'd even decided. It was like my body was done waiting for my brain to grow a spine. He noticed, but he tried not to. He glanced toward our side of the room, weighed his options, then gave me the fake friendly nod. "Yeah, Mark, right?" he said. "Mike," I corrected. I'd worked there for 7 years. He gave the kind of laugh people give when they want you to know they don't actually care. Right, Mike, what's up?" I kept my voice steady. "Just so we're clear," I said, "the leadership team is receiving guaranteed payouts, and everyone else is getting—" "What, exactly?" The room tightened. You could feel it. The kind of silence where people suddenly become very interested in their laptops. He smiled wider, like I'd set him up for a punchline. "Well, like I said, there will be opportunities with the new organization. Obviously, we can't guarantee roles for every single person." "That's not what I asked," I said. "You said leadership gets money. What do we get?" It wasn't loud. I didn't raise my voice. But it landed. His eyes flashed, just for a second. That flash you see in someone who's not used to being challenged in public. "You get a chance to be part of something bigger," he replied, leaning into the script. "We're all in this together. Without this sale, some of you might not have jobs at all in 6 months. This is a rescue." A few people nodded like he'd descended with stone tablets. I stared at him. "So they get a parachute," I said, "and we get to be grateful the plane hasn't hit the ground yet." Someone choked on a laugh and disguised it as a cough. His jaw tightened. There it was, the crack. "If that's how you choose to see it," he said, "that's your perspective. But I'd suggest being a little more positive, especially with the new owners listening." And then he did it. He looked right past me, over my head to the row of directors, and they all smiled the same thin, careful smile back at him. The message was clear: sit down, be quiet, or you'll be on a list before lunch. I sat back slowly. I didn't apologize. I didn't look away. For the first time since I joined the company, I let my boss see the way I actually felt about him. Not angry, not emotional, just done. But that was just the beginning. He went back to his slides, talking about integration timelines and platform consolidation. Those words weren't theoretical to me. I was the platform. I knew every ugly little patch and secret shortcut we'd built into the system to get us through deadlines 18 months ago. I knew which services were held together with duct tape and prayer. I knew which parts of the infrastructure were documented, and which ones were held entirely inside my head, because we'll write it down later, had turned into, it works, don't touch it. He didn't. None of them did. They'd stood in front of investors and pitched our proprietary stack, like it was a neatly labeled product on a shelf. They didn't know that half of it was 3 lines of code I'd written at 2:14 a.m. on a Sunday because their big launch would have crashed without it. They didn't know how many times I'd quietly rerouted traffic to save his speeches from being interrupted by a 500 error. I listened to him talk about selling what we've built and realized something important. They weren't just selling a company. They were selling the bridge I'd been reinforcing in the dark, while they stomped across it in expensive shoes, confident it was made of steel because it hadn't collapsed. Yet, no one asked me if I wanted to be a part of the sale. No one asked any of us. They didn't need to. In their minds, we were furniture, assets, weighted numbers on a spreadsheet labeled headcount. And still, people smiled. They whispered about stock options at the new place and getting in early. Not one person turned around and said, "This is messed up." Not one. The irritation I'd been swallowing for years didn't feel like irritation anymore. It felt like clarity. By the time the meeting wrapped up, my fate had been decided without my input, at least on paper. They thought they were the only ones capable of making big decisions in that room. They thought we'd all keep our heads down, that we'd cling to the idea of being lucky to stay on like beggars outside a restaurant. They didn't know that I'd made a decision too. Our CTO sidled up to me as people stood, giving me a practiced paternal smile. "Hey, Mike," he said, getting my name right this time. "Let's keep the questions a bit more constructive next time, yeah? Optics are important right now." I held his gaze. "So is honesty," I said. He laughed, clapping my shoulder like we were teammates. "That's why we value you," he lied. "You're a straight shooter. Just shoot me a slack next time instead of in the middle of the room, okay?" I looked at his hand on my shoulder until he moved it. "I won't have to do it again," I said. He heard what he wanted to hear. "That's the spirit," he replied, and walked away, thinking he'd put me back in my box. On my way back to my desk, I passed the glass-walled war room, where the acquisition team was camped out. Laptops open, spreadsheets everywhere, a printed diagram of my architecture on the wall, with boxes labeled things like auth, core API, data layer, legacy. Under core API, in small handwriting, someone had written, "Heavy reliance on senior engineer, MK, knowledge transfer required." They'd underlined required twice. I stood there for a moment, watching my entire job reduced to a line item in black ink. I didn't know it yet, but that little note would end up costing them everything. I went back to my desk, opened my terminal, and for the first time since I joined the company, I didn't start by checking alerts. I opened a blank document instead, and I started writing. I didn't plan revenge. That makes it sound dramatic, like I stood over some whiteboard sketching arrows and motives. It wasn't like that. It was quieter, smaller, more deliberate, more inevitable. I wrote one sentence at the top of the blank document. "Everything I know alone. Not out of ego, out of fact. For years, every shortcut, every workaround, every quiet miracle that kept our product alive had been mine. Not because I wanted it that way, But because every time I tried to document something, I got told, "Later, Mike, just ship it." And later always meant never. You can't sell knowledge you don't own. That morning, after the meeting, I didn't code. I didn't fix the backup job. I didn't answer Slack. I wrote down every system dependency, every undocumented service, every brittle component that could break if someone pressed the wrong key. Not to threaten anyone, not to sabotage anything, just to understand the scale of what they'd taken for granted. By lunch, the list was 5 pages long. By evening, it was 43. And then something in that list made me stop typing. One line, root access, MK only. I stared at it for a long moment, not moving, not breathing, just seeing it for what it was. The heart of the whole operation beating inside my laptop and nowhere else. People like to joke that the company ran on coffee and duct tape. The truth was, it ran on my SSH keys and 3 sleepless years. I leaned back in my chair. They had sold something they didn't understand. Worse, something they didn't actually own. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Around 4 p.m., the CTO came by my desk, trying to look casual. He leaned on the divider, chewing gum like a teenager. "Hey, partner," he said. "Big day, huh? Listen, we're going to need you to start prepping documentation for the new owners. High-level stuff first, then deeper technicals." I nodded slowly. "Sure. When do you want it?" "Oh, sooner rather than later," he said. "They want to integrate our stack into theirs ASAP. No pressure, but yeah, pressure. That word hit me differently now. Before, pressure meant 2 a.m. alerts and sprint deadlines. Now it meant they needed me more than they dared admit. I closed my laptop. "No problem," I said. "I'll start tonight." He gave me a thumbs up like he'd just rewarded a loyal dog. I went home instead. Not to drink, not to rage, to think. I made dinner, ate quietly, sat at my table with the same notebook I used for personal projects. And for the first time since the meeting, I allowed myself one honest thought. They don't get to decide my value anymore. That night, I made 3 moves. First, I exported every log, cleanly, legally, with timestamps and proper access. All evidence of how many violations leadership had made, unapproved deployments, forced rollbacks, security protocols overridden for fast demos, all things that looked harmless until a buyer asked, "Was this maintained properly?" Second, I sent a polite email to a recruiter who'd been messaging me for months, a competitor, larger, stable, with a reputation for respecting engineers because they couldn't afford not to. I didn't ask for a job. I asked for a conversation. I got a reply in 9 minutes. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m.? Third, I revoked my own root key, only mine, no one else's. Left theirs intact, nothing illegal, nothing destructive. Just one access token, the one tied to my personal account, disabled until further notice. It was the first night in years I slept deeply. The next morning, the recruiter call lasted 20 minutes. The interview that followed lasted 2 hours. The offer came at 4:30 p.m., higher salary, better title, real benefits, respect baked into the culture like oxygen. I didn't say yes. Not yet. I wanted to finish what I started. When I returned to the office the next day, the mood was different. People were jittery. A few devs whispered near the whiteboard about the migration plan. 2 directors paced the hallway. There was tension in the air, thin, tight, like a stretched wire. I sat down, opened my laptop, and watched Slack messages pile in. CTO, "Hey Mike, can you jump into the integration call? They have technical questions." CEO, "Need you in conference room C in 5. CFO, "Quick favor, can you help us clarify system ownership for the buyers?" I stood up and walked to conference room C. Inside, CEO, CTO, 2 nervous directors, and 3 suits on video call, the acquiring company. The CEO smiled too wide. "Ah, perfect. Our senior engineer's here. He can walk you through the environment." I sat, folded my hands. The lead buyer cleared his throat. "Mike, right? We've been reviewing the architecture diagrams. We have concerns. The CEO laughed too loudly. Nothing to worry about. Mike built half of this stuff. He can walk you through everything. The buyer adjusted his glasses. That's the concern. The CEO's smile twitched. What do you mean? The buyer turned to me. Is it correct that you are the sole administrator for several core services? I didn't spare my boss. Yes, correct. The CEO jumped in. Obviously, that's temporary. We'll document everything. Knowledge transfer is already underway. It isn't, I said. The room froze. The buyer leaned forward. Can you walk us through the authentication layer? I shook my head once. Calm. Even. Not without a contract. I wasn't loud. I wasn't emotional. I was simply done giving free oxygen to people who'd tried to suffocate me. The CEO stared at me, pupils tightening. Excuse me, the buyer cleared his throat again. Are you employed here? For now, I said. The CEO snapped. Then start talking. I met his eyes. My employment doesn't include unpaid consulting for a company I don't work for yet. That was the moment, the shift, the click of a trap closing. The buyer muted his mic and spoke to someone off camera. When he came back, his voice was colder. Without immediate and complete knowledge transfer, we cannot confirm the valuation provided by your leadership team. The CEO's face drained of color. I felt something quiet bloom in my chest. Not triumph, not gloating, something cleaner, something like balance shifting back into place after leaning too far for too long. That night, I didn't go home angry. I went home free. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. The morning everything collapsed didn't look dramatic. No storm, no shouting in hallways, no police tape or flashing lights. Just a quiet office with stale coffee and a strange tension in the air, like everyone sensed something was about to break but couldn't name it. I arrived at 9:12. No one looked at me. People were glued to their screens, typing like they were trying to outrun a ghost. A director speed walked past me, holding 2 laptops like shields. From behind a conference room door came the muffled sound of a man who'd lost his patience. Hours ago, then my Slack exploded. CTO, hey, the buyers can't access the monitoring suite. Did you change something? Director, we need you in room B. Right now. CEO, answer your messages immediately. I sat down, hung my jacket on the back of my chair, opened my laptop, and didn't type a thing. It was strange, seeing panic in a place that had been nothing but confident arrogance the day before, like watching a giant realize its legs were made of paper the whole time. The CTO appeared beside my desk, out of breath. Mike, what the hell did you say on the call yesterday? The truth, I said. He rubbed his temples. We need everything, now. Documentation, credentials, architecture, all of it. Do I have a contract with them? I asked. His hand dropped from his face. Don't do this. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm working my job for this company, not the one trying to buy us. He looked around like someone might save him. No one did. Look, he said quietly, they can pull out of the deal. If they do, leadership loses everything. We lose everything. You need to help. I tilted my head a little. Did you help me? He blinked. What? Last quarter, when I asked for a raise, or when I asked for training support, or when I tried to bring in another engineer because I was drowning in on-call rotations. Did you help? He opened his mouth, closed it. This is different. That's what I thought too, I said. Until yesterday. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. And maybe he was. I stood up. I'm going to get a coffee. He grabbed my arm. Mike, they're saying the system valuation was based on your infrastructure. They're asking why there's zero redundancy of knowledge. Ask the CEO, I said, gently pulling my arm free. He's the one who said I didn't deserve anything. I walked out. Not with anger, not with triumph, with peace. Sometimes peace feels heavier than rage, but better in every way. In the lobby, I stirred sugar into my coffee while a salesperson whispered into her phone. They're saying the deal's collapsing. What do you mean? What do I mean? I mean collapsing. She stopped when she saw me. Her face tightened like she wanted to blame me, but didn't know how. When I got back upstairs, the conference room door slammed open so hard it ricocheted off the wall. The CEO stormed out, red-faced, sweating, jaw clenched like it might shatter. He pointed at me from across the hall. "You," he hissed, "inside. Now." I didn't move. "I'm not in your chain of command during calls with buyers. I don't owe them anything." "You owe me," he snapped. I sipped my coffee. "That ended yesterday, in the meeting where you said we get nothing, remember?" His eyes twitched. "We can fix that. Look, if you salvage this, if you get us through the transition, I'll authorize a retention bonus, a big one." I almost smiled. There it was. The first real moment of honesty I'd ever seen from him. Not apology, not accountability. Need. "This isn't about money," I said. "What then?" he demanded. "You want a title? CTO? Lead architect? Name it." I set my coffee down on the windowsill. I wanted respect. "For 7 years, you never gave it," he swallowed. Hard. In the glass behind him, I saw movement. One of the buyers stepping into frame on the video call inside the room. His face was cold, professional, done. The CEO's phone buzzed. He looked down. Whatever he saw made the color drain from his face. The buyer's voice echoed faintly through the open door. "Locking terms. Deal terminated." Silence fell over the hallway like a dropped curtain. Someone exhaled sharply. Someone else whispered, "Holy shit." A woman sat slowly in a chair like her legs wouldn't hold her. Papers fell off a desk somewhere. The CEO stared at me as if I'd personally unplugged the universe. "It's your fault," he whispered. "No," I said. "It's yours. You sold something you didn't understand, then treated the person holding it together like he didn't matter." He staggered back a step. I picked up my coffee again. "I'm giving you my 2-week notice." "You can't quit?" he said, voice cracking. "You fired me first," I replied. "Yesterday, when you told me I get nothing." I walked past him. No drama, no applause. Just a hallway, a door, and the sound of someone realizing their empire was built out of my patience, not their competence. By the time I reached the elevator, a director jogged after me. "Wait, the new owners want to talk to you directly. They're offering you a role. Big money, title too." "No," I said. He blinked. "No. They only want me to clean up someone else's mess. I'm done cleaning." The elevator doors slid open. I stepped in. "They thought you'd be loyal," he said weakly. "They confused loyalty with silence," I answered. "And silence isn't free." The doors closed. When I got outside, the cold air felt different, like something unclenched in my lungs for the first time in years. My phone buzzed. The recruiter from the competitor. "Ready to talk next steps?" I typed back, "Yes." That afternoon, I signed the offer. The next morning, I cleared my desk at my old job. A few coworkers watched quietly. Some looked guilty. Some looked confused. Most looked scared. The salesperson from earlier approached me. "Is it true? They lost the deal?" "Yes. And it's really because you—" "No," I cut in. "It's because leadership lied." She looked down. "Are you happy?" Happy. It wasn't the word. Not yet. "I'm free," I said. "That's enough for now." I took my box, walked out, and didn't look back at the building. There was nothing there worth remembering. My new job started 2 weeks later. Modern systems, proper documentation, mentorship, real boundaries. Colleagues who said thank you and meant it. A manager who asked, "How can we support you?" and didn't blink when I gave honest answers. They thought I'd be broken. I wasn't. Some nights, I sit on my balcony with a beer and think about that quarterly meeting. The applause, the arrogance, the way they cheered for something that was never theirs to celebrate. Someone once told me that revenge is loud. They were wrong. Revenge is quiet. It's the absence of begging, the absence of explaining, the absence of carrying people who never carried you. Revenge is peace. And I've got plenty of that now.